you to do is we'd like you to put them into the chat. So we're going to keep you all muted just to make sure that we don't have too much going on at one time. So if you want to ask a question, then what we'd ask you to do is to type the question into the chat, and you can find that in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And we will be recording this session so that we can use it later. Also, we will distribute the recording of the session to you after the presentation is over so that you can look at it again. We'll also be giving a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So the video and the PowerPoint presentation will come to you after the session. And so we will get this started here right away. So we'll start off here with a couple of funnies. This one I thought was appropriate given the time of year. So you don't want to, first of all, you don't want grandma to get run over by a reindeer, but also you wouldn't want it to not be covered under your travel insurance policy. So I thought that was pretty cute. I like this one. Getting older is like visiting an all-you-can-eat buffet. What should be hot is cold. What should be firm is limp. And the buns are bigger than anything else on the menu. I'm so old, I can remember getting through an entire day without taking a picture of anything. And I'm sure everyone here today can remember getting through an entire day without taking a picture of anything, although there's lots of kids around that, that can't remember that. So I hope you enjoyed those. So the agenda for today is we're going to do some introductions here for the people that are joining us from MediQuote. We're going to talk about traveling during the pandemic, COVID coverage, and we're going to answer all of your questions. So please don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. Again, you can find the access to the chat on the bottom of the screen. And Pam is going to be watching that to make sure we catch all of those. So we'll do the introductions now. So my name is Lori York. I'm a senior broker at MediQuote. I have worked in the insurance industry for the majority of my career. I've worked in travel insurance for quite some time now. I celebrated my 15th anniversary at MediQuote this summer. And I worked at a travel insurance company for 5 years before that. So I've been around the block, as they say, but happy to be here today. Pam, can you give us a wave there? Great, thank you. So Pam joined MediQuote in 2010. She is a senior broker as well. And we both sell insurance over the phone and in person when our office is open. And Pam is also in charge of training our new brokers that join MediQuote. And then we have Matt. Matt is our IT guru and our marketing guy. I think he's having problems with his webcam, so he's not. He's here, but you can't see him. He's behind the scenes somewhat, and he normally sends out our newsletters and updates our website, and he's going to make sure everything runs smoothly today. Okay, so we'll get started. So MediQuote Insurance Brokers, just a bit about us here. We are a travel insurance brokerage firm. We're independent, and we have been around since 1994. We offer clients an unbiased perspective on a variety of travel and medical insurance products. So Visitors to Canada insurance, trip cancellation insurance, expatriate insurance, all sorts of travel medical insurance, even health and dental insurance if you're not traveling is something that we offer. So we have been around the block here at MediQuote as well. So it all started on March 13th, 2020. The government issued a travel advisory for all Canadians, and basically all of the Canadians that were abroad were cautioned to come home. And I think most of them did that. There were some that didn't do that. Some stayed on where they were, but for the most part, most snowbirds especially, and most Canadians did make their way back to Canada. We're now going on 9 months. The travel advisory has been in effect for 9 months. And we never thought that it would go on this long, but it is, and it continues. And regular travel insurance policies were never written with the notion that they could close the border between the US and Canada. So it wasn't, the insurance policies weren't ready, we'll put it that way, when that happened. So we'll get into that more later. Now, you probably all have heard that air travel is permitted during the government travel advisory, although the land borders aren't open. So the land borders remain closed to snowbirds, but if you want to travel someplace by air, you may do that. And there are lots of places that you can travel. So for snowbirds, it makes it challenging if you rely on your cars for when you're down there. So most snowbirds go for a long period of time, as you know, and they need their cars because they, it's more cost effective to drive down there and use your car while you're there than rent a car or buy a car when you're down there. So just a few things here about flying. So I went onto the Air Canada website, and they have implemented some things in case you haven't been on a flight lately. Some things that are supposed to, I guess, incentivize people to make sure that they know that air travel is still safe. So this clean care, safety cleaning program that they have. They have flexible booking options. So if you need to change a flight, you can do that without a penalty, without a fee. Or if you need to cancel your flight, you can do that without a fee. So they're definitely accommodating some of the concerns for passengers at this time, trying to get that restarted. This is a website through WestJet, they are offering no charge COVID-19 travel insurance. And when you click on that website, you can see all of the different things that are entailed in that and all the terms and conditions there, but they are offering that, as they say here, at no charge for certain travelers. Sunwing also has a COVID-19 coverage. This one, you can see in the picture here that it's supplied by Manulife. It says included at no additional cost on all flights and vacation packages. But when you actually click on this website, you find out that there is a few terms and conditions here as well. Like for instance, you have to, book your trip between September 17th and November 30th. You have to actually depart on your trip between October 16th and December 31st. And your maximum duration cannot be more than 22 days. So if you are planning a lengthy vacation, and some of these actually go for all of the COVID coverage offered by airlines, so Air Canada, WestJet, and Sunwing here, that if you are traveling for a longer duration of time, you don't get anything. They just don't allow you to have coverage for the COVID if you're traveling for a lengthy period of time. Plus the maximum is $200,000. So that's not a lot of money when you consider, some of the care that you might need if you should catch COVID. So the airline coverage, it is free. You don't qualify for coverage unless your trip is under a certain length of time. So it's 21 days on Air Canada and WestJet, 22 days on Sunwing. The maximum coverage is $200,000 Canadian. So again, not that much. So it's not appropriate for the snowbird or the long stay market because your trip is longer than the 21 days, and so you don't get anything. Can't use that for the first 21 days and buy coverage for after that. That doesn't work. So this was a news article about WestJet and Air Canada. They entered into a testing agreement with Hawaii. So if you're traveling through Calgary, I believe, you can get a test while you're in the Calgary airport, and then they will accept that in Hawaii. So that was an interesting one for those of you going to Hawaii. But there are other stipulations. There seems to be stipulations and requirements to a number of different places, not so much the US, but other places in, like I was talking to someone about traveling to Roatan, Honduras, which I believe is in South America, but they require you to have a COVID test 72 hours before you go. And so then that's a little bit of a challenge to figure all of that out, because it takes some time to get the test and then for you to get your results back, and then you got to fly there all in the 72 hours. So it can be a bit challenging. Here's another article. This is Air Canada again, trying to entice people to Hawaii, and some stuff that they're doing here to make sure that you feel at home and that you'll go to Hawaii. There's also those news articles that you may have seen recently in regards to snowbirds shipping their car and then flying across the border. So this is a picture of a couple, I guess, that did that. I believe this one was out of, yeah, it says they're, they were flying into Plattsburgh, New York. So they must have been out of flying out of Toronto or Windsor or something like that, just a short little flight. It's not quite as easy out west because we don't have as many, the cities out west aren't as close to the US border, and then the US cities aren't as close to the Canadian border. So it doesn't make it as easy as it is out east, I don't think. But it does mean that some aren't doing that. I believe some are shipping their cars, and we have heard of companies that will ship cars from the West. Here's another article about Canadians shipping their cars and then flying because they just don't want to stay in the Canadian winter. Not used to it, don't want it, don't like it. Pam and I talk all day to people who they just don't want to stay in Canada for the winter, so they are going anyway. Okay, so here's one. It was a CTV News clip about a phone app called ArriveCAN. And ArriveCAN is basically an app that gives instructions to Canadians that are coming back into Canada when, after they've been abroad, and kind of gives you all the lowdown on what you have to do to quarantine and stuff like that. Of course, none of that was available in March when people were flocking back to Canada, but it is available now. So that is something you might want to check out. So once you decide that you're going to travel, you need to decide, how much COVID coverage do you want? Do you need COVID coverage? How much is enough? And we'd like everyone on our webinar today to take our poll. So Matt is going to toss the link into the chat. So if everyone could find the chat and click on that link and make your vote inside that link. That way we can see here what it is that, tallied up all of our webinar watchers today are thinking. So go ahead and click that link and decide which amount of COVID coverage is enough for you. Just take a moment to do that. I see that some of you are answering the question in the chat, but that won't get us any results tallied from the whole group. So if you could click on the link that Matt put in, then
Lori, I think the poll is actually having some problems. I don't think it's collecting the votes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, let's we'll just abandon that thought and go through some of the ones that we have here. So Lisa says 2 million, Dennis says 3 million, Wendy says 4 million. Well, you guys are all pretty good at going in order. Wayne says 5 million. Elko says 2 million, 5 million, 5 million. Kathy and Jim are looking for 1 million, 2 million, 2 million. Okay, so yeah, there is a lot of coverage. So the Air Canada and WestJet coverage of 200,000, and I guess for you guys that is just not enough anyways. So I kind of agree with you on that. I feel that if you're going to go to the US and if you could get COVID, then you probably want to have more than the 200,000. Just in case you land up in the hospital, in the intensive care, you know, on a ventilator, who knows what, the charges can rack up quite quickly. So $1 million is good, 2 million is better. We even have one option that we're selling now, which is 5 million of coverage. So, you know, we believe that those options are enough to cover you for what you might need. And then, of course, one of the things that people ask is, how much is it going to cost? So that's a tricky question for us to answer because, first of all, every year, well, first of all, I'll back up before that. Everyone kind of compares the cost to what they paid last year. And every year, travel insurance goes up relating to the US medical inflation. So the US has a special medical inflation that's separate and apart from regular inflation because it's typically so high. It can be like 8% in a year that medical facilities will increase their prices by year over year because of the cost of delivering those services to people who need treatment. So that's the first thing that gets added on to travel insurance costs every year. But also you could move up to the next age bracket, which would also be a cost increase to you. You could have also had a worsening of a health condition, and that could cost you more. If you answer more questions with a yes on the medical questionnaire, the more money you're going to pay. So if you're answering more questions with a yes this year than you did last year because you came down with a new condition, then that's going to affect your price. And of course, COVID coverage on top of that, we find that it's about 10% surcharge on top of the regular prices. So there you go. It can be 10%, it could be more than that. So it just really depends. So we're going to talk about more of the frequently asked questions that we get, Pam and I get, and all of the brokers here at MediQuote about COVID coverage. And hopefully it helps you to understand what's available for you. So the first question is, I already have an annual plan that I paid for that doesn't expire for a few months. Can I use that and travel on that plan? So if you had an annual plan that was effective prior to the travel restrictions starting, that policy will have one of two exclusions regarding the travel advisory. So it really depends which one your policy has, which will basically help you to decide whether or not it's going to cover you or not. So let's go through that together. So the first one, type 1, your travel to, this is the wording of the exclusion that we'll read together here. Your travel to a country, region, or city for which the Canadian government has issued an official travel advisory to avoid all travel or avoid all non-essential travel regarding the country, region, or city of your destination before your departure date. If the travel advisory is issued after your departure date, this exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or a medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory. So if you just take that last sentence, if the travel advisory is issued after your departure date, well, we know that the travel advisory is already in effect now, and if we depart in the future, then it actually will not cover you for anything relating to the travel advisory. So And that's all because you're departing anyways, even though the advisory has been called before your departure date. So, and actually that's not going to cover you for anything at all. So that is the kind of the worst exclusion to have, because it's not actually, that policy just isn't going to cover you for anything if you decide to depart after the travel advisory is called. Hopefully that's clear. The second type of exclusion reads this way, and I'll read it to you here. Any act of terrorism or any medical condition you suffer or contract when an official travel advisory issued by the Canadian government states avoid all non-essential travel or avoid all travel regarding the country, region, or city of your destination before your effective date. To view the travel advisories, visit the Government of Canada travel website. This exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or a medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory. So basically, that last sentence again, it only applies to the reason for the travel advisory, which is COVID. So in this situation, you don't have coverage for COVID, but you do have coverage for everything else. So if you have a policy that reads like this, then you are better off. At least you have coverage for if you fall and break your ankle, or if you should have a heart attack, heaven forbid, but you wouldn't have coverage for COVID. So neither scenario is ideal, because really you would like to have coverage for COVID. So we are now selling coverage for COVID, so we'll get into that in a few minutes, but I did want to share this website, and this is the Government of Canada's travel advisory website. So you can see here it says avoid non-essential travel outside of Canada until further notice. So it's basically warning Canadians not to travel. And then of course it's warning Canadians to avoid all cruise ship travel outside of Canada until further notice. So that's pretty much everything is affected. And that's what affects travel insurance, is what this website does indicate. So, okay, so the next question that we get quite a lot of, I need to buy a policy. What coverage is out there to purchase? So if you're planning a trip, you need to purchase insurance. You want to have coverage for COVID. What can we get for you? Well, up until July, there were absolutely no options available at all. Like, we couldn't get you COVID coverage. We didn't have anything. The insurance companies weren't selling it. They were afraid to sell it. They didn't really know what was, what their risk was. And so they just didn't have anything out there. But in July, we started to see some options become available. Not good ones for the snowbirds, but it didn't really matter because it wasn't snowbird season yet. So in September, we found that some snowbird options became available. And by October, we had about 4 options that offered COVID benefits. So at least we have some options finally. And but what we can tell you is that they're not all created equally. So we're going to go into kind of what is offered out there, so that at least you can make an informed decision. So the first one is, I'm going to call it the Hyundai version. Nothing against Hyundais today. I remember way back when I was a kid and my first car, if you had a Hyundai, you had the beater. So this is the beater version. It offered coverage for COVID in that there's no exclusion for COVID. So that basically means that they will cover COVID because they won't be excluding COVID. So there's no additional benefits for, if you have COVID or if you contract COVID. It's basically considered the most basic coverage. And it typically, because there's just no exclusion, you get the full policy maximum, whatever that might be. So that is the lowest version, the Hyundai version. The Chevrolet version is like a COVID or pandemic endorsement, specifically allowing coverage for anything related to COVID. It might give you a few extra perks, possibly a limited maximum, but it definitely is not just not excluding it. So it's a better option than just a Hyundai version because it does actually specifically indicate in the policy wording that COVID is covered. But then always there is a Cadillac version, and we do have a Cadillac version when it comes to COVID coverage. So this option offers $5 million of coverage. So $5 million of coverage for COVID, and $5 million of coverage for, if you should fall and twist your ankle or have a heart attack or a stroke or whatever. It offers $5 million of coverage. And then there would be no 10-day limit to get home either. So that, if they do open up the borders, but then they end up closing them again, then there would be no 10-day limit to get home, which I know a lot of, we heard stories of people rushing home in 10 days so they could get home before their coverage was over. This Cadillac version also offers coverage for hospital and physician costs due to COVID-19, whether there is a travel advisory in effect at the time of your departure or not. They offer a small benefit if you are quarantining at destination outside of hospital to a maximum of $1,400 Canadian, and even a little top up of $500 for perishable goods. So groceries, restaurant orders delivered during your quarantine, and even taxis to and from a COVID-19 testing center for your convenience. So a few extra little goodies there. They also have access to virtual consultations with the physician. Probably the one thing you want to do at this time when COVID is so prevalent is stay out of the hospitals and out of, where the COVID patients are hanging out, and do a virtual consultation. So this type of plan offers that as well. And then they have a kind of a nice automatic extension of the policy and the rider if you should get COVID during the end of your trip. So let's say right before you were supposed to come home, you end up getting COVID and you have to quarantine. You can't drive home because you're quarantining. It'll automatically extend your policy without payment of premium for 14 days plus 3 days to get home. So that's another added benefit here that will save you some money. So lots of good benefits on the Cadillac version there that aren't offered in the Chevrolet or the Hyundai version. So on these policies, again, what would I have coverage for? We get that a lot. And basically the answer to that is whatever is medically necessary to treat you, including doctor's visits, hospital stays, ICUs, ventilators, everything that you will need medically to treat you for COVID. No matter how bad it is, they will cover you up to the maximum. So, and like we say, there's variety of different maximums, but the Cadillac version is 5 million. So it's all the way up to the maximum of your policy. Specific questions, specific scenarios are hard to answer because of the fact that these are such unprecedented times, which leads me to the next slide here. We had many, quote, misprecedented times, which is when we had all the answers to all the questions because, they'd happen time after time. And so, we knew the answers and the insurance company knows the answers. But the reality is today that the insurance company doesn't have the answer to some of these questions because this has just never happened before. So it's been a challenge even answering questions sometimes because of this. So how am I eligible? Am I eligible and how do I qualify? So different companies have different eligibility and rating criteria. Typically what we find is that the richer the benefits, the tighter the qualifying criteria will be. So we'll go into how, what to expect if you're applying for or getting a quote for travel insurance with COVID. So the first one is upfront underwriting. So basically all the regular questions, have you ever had a heart problem, lung problem, diabetes, stroke, all of those questions will still be asked on your, like when you get a quote or when you apply for travel insurance, but you will also be asked other questions. And the other questions include your destination, because destination is actually being considered in terms of if the incident rate at your destination is going up, then your price will be higher. If the incident rate at your destination is getting like better and going lower, then your price for COVID coverage will be lower as well. So that's something new that we saw this year that we hadn't seen in the past. Height and weight is also being asked. I guess that's a factor for how hard you'll react to the COVID-19, and so it's going to affect your insurance. Immunosuppressive medication is also a factor. Corticosteroids is also a factor. So if you take some of those types of medications, then that can increase your price as well. And then there is what is called back-end underwriting. So back-end underwriting is basically if you you buy a policy and you have a claim, and then they ask questions at the time of the claim. So one of the questions that we're seeing, which is kind of considered a back-end underwriting, is was there a quarantine requirement imposed at your destination? And if there was, then that affects your coverage. So I did find this, website that shows kind of which US states are imposing quarantine restrictions at the time. And so, you can definitely check that out. You don't have to wait and roll the dice to find out whether or not you'll have coverage. You can find out if there is travel restrictions at your destination. And then if your policy has that question at the time of claim, then you probably don't want to buy that policy. And we can certainly help you to find that out. So this is really a question that you need to ask if you are getting a quote for travel insurance. So let's read this quarantine exclusion. So benefits are not payable under this policy if losses sustained or expenses incurred are the direct or indirect result of any of the following: for any eligible expenses incurred as a result of sickness while under a mandatory or suggested quarantine upon arrival. This exclusion applies if the expenses are directly or indirectly related to the reason for the quarantine. So basically what that is saying is that if, let's say you're going to, I don't even know where they are imposing any quarantine restrictions at the moment. I think maybe California has some quarantine restrictions. So if you buy a policy that has this exclusion and you're traveling to California, then if you are required to quarantine and you actually get COVID, they're not going to cover you because there was a mandatory or suggested quarantine in California when you contracted COVID. So it's a way to limit their risk, but it's only discussed, at the time of a claim, not at the time of applying. So you can definitely ask the question. We definitely want you to ask that question of whoever you're buying insurance from, because they should know that you don't have to roll the dice and take your chances. It should be something that if you're going to a place that does have a quarantine requirement, you just don't want to buy a policy that has this, because then it's not going to cover you for the most important part of the trip, which is, during your travel. Because I would say that, if you're going to quarantine in Canada, like we've all been doing, and I know Manitoba has been under quarantine for a number of weeks. I think since November the 11th, we've been basically shut down and not been able to do much. So, if you're going to do that while you're here, you can definitely do that down south. The risky time is actually getting there. So if you have the quarantine when you get there, then that's kind of not covering the riskiest part of your trip. So you definitely want to ask the question. So things to remember. So the rules are changing very rapidly. We've never seen things change as fast as they have been this year, this COVID year. And prices are changing based on the incident rate at your destination. So, if for some companies, if the incident rate at your destination is going up, then your price is going to go up. The only way to stop that is to lock in your price and purchase your policy. And then that way, you've locked in your price and you won't see the price go up. But if you get a quote and then come back, 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, you might find that the price is higher because, while you weren't watching, the incident rate has been getting higher, and so the price ends up being higher. So just a final word about trip cancellation, and we're going to get to some of your questions here. So trip cancellation will not cover you for COVID. So all of the insurance companies out there are considering COVID as a known risk, and they will not provide you coverage for trips booked in the future relating to COVID. Trip cancellation has kind of been tossed on its ear anyways, because, for the most part, the airlines are allowing you to change your flights or get your money back if you cancel, because they're trying to entice people back into traveling and into flying. You kind of don't need it right now anyways. But one thing I wanted to mention is that if you got a credit from your travel supplier in March when you had to cancel a trip and you didn't get your money back, you got a credit instead, then you should be able to rebook your trip cancellation on your new trip, when you rebook a new trip with that travel credit. So that's if you had a trip cancellation policy on the trip you got that credit on. So you can kind of reuse the policy. So you'll want to ask about that too, if that scenario applies to you. Okay, so that is it for the presentation, but I think we have a lot of questions. Pam, do you want to take over?
We do. Ryan asked at the very beginning about topping up the airline policies if the trip is longer than 21 days. Ryan, that is a restriction in their policy. So my understanding is, and I believe the Sunwing policy that we had up on the slide said specifically that if the trip was longer than 21 days, the coverage wouldn't apply. So as far as the WestJet and Air Canada policies go, it's my understanding they're written the same way, but without actually seeing the wording, I can't confirm that. So my understanding is right now that if the trip is longer than 21 days, then that coverage is negated. It actually disappears and it's not valid. So for that Air Canada coverage to be valid, the trip has to be 21 days or less.
Just a note, Pam, before you go on, sorry to interrupt you. I have read all of those policies for Air Canada and WestJet and Sunwing, and that is exactly the case. You are correct.
Okay.
It applies to all of them.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. Reg and Brenda wanted to know if you test positive for COVID in the US, their concern is that Canadians would then be a low priority compared to Americans in receiving medical care. I'd love to answer this question, but I can't. That is going to be a decision based or done by the medical community in the United States. I have no way of answering that. I would like to say that they will, look after whoever is in most need first rather than the citizenship. But that's not a question that we can answer, unfortunately.
It goes back to being the unprecedented times. We just don't know the answers to some of these, specific questions.
And Lori, you've insulted Elco's Hyundai EV, by the way. They just had to let you know. Wendy had several questions. Wendy would like to know which underwriters we're offering. The policies include Senior Guard, which is done by Away Care. We've got a TourMed policy. We have Manulife. We have Industrial Alliance. What we do, Wendy, is we look at all of the ones that we're comparing pricing for to find the best suit for your travel and needs. The second question she asked was, if needing to call for pre-authorization at destination, where and who do you call? Wendy, when you purchase a policy, one of the documents we give you is called a confirmation of insurance. And that confirmation page provides you with your policy number as well as the telephone numbers that you can use should you need to seek medical care. And you are right. Whenever possible, whenever, it is something that you are able to do, you should be calling prior to seeking medical care. And again, those numbers are provided. Usually in the US, there is a toll-free number, and beyond the US, they do provide a collect number that you can call. And the last question Wendy asked was, if conditions change at your destination after you buy your coverage, how does that affect your policy? If the conditions change after you've purchased your policy, it won't affect your policy because your policy is a contract that is now established and in force. It is only going to affect you if you haven't purchased your policy and you're still in the quote stage. Then if there's a fluctuation in the number of cases of COVID, the pricing will be affected. Okay. Ryan's asking, pardon me, about the credit card coverage and what their coverages are like. Again, Ryan, those are very specific policies and you'd have to see the policy contract. One of the things we always recommend is if you do have coverage through a credit card, that you contact your provider to find out if that coverage is going to be affected by this travel advisory. Joyce wants to know, are these policies separate from evacuation policies? And is it recommended to get one of those as well? Lori, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so evacuation policies, I believe what you're talking about is a policy that like doesn't cover hospital stays or like treatment for your condition. All they cover you for is just to be emergency evacuated back to Canada. I believe that's what you mean by that. And those type of policies are separate from like regular travel medical policies, because regular travel medical policies kind of have that evacuation portion built right in. So you don't actually need to buy an extra policy to have that coverage there for you. So basically what that means is that if it's medically necessary to get you back to Canada for treatment, the travel insurance policies like the ones we've been talking about today would cover you for that.
Thanks, Lori. Kathy and Jim were asking, does the WestJet coverage you referred to earlier, called COVID-19, cover other health emergencies too? No, that WestJet coverage is specific to the COVID-19 virus and applies to those medical conditions only. You'd have to purchase other coverage if you needed coverage for other medical situations. Dan says his family of 5, they're going to Maui on in March for 14 days. So then they would each have $200,000 worth of COVID coverage through Air Canada. And is there a fee from Air Canada for the coverage?
You want me to take that one, or?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, so my understanding is whoever buys a ticket gets the $200,000 worth of coverage for COVID. Again, only coverage for COVID, not coverage for everything else. And that is being tossed in for free. So it's kind of included in the price of your airfare. So there would be no fee for that from Air Canada.
All right. Estrelita asks if there's any provision on those who are able to get the vaccine. Currently, there is no discount if you've had the vaccine. There's no provision for the vaccine in the policy. And again, because those aren't currently widely available, that's a question that is a wait and see. So currently, your price is not reduced if you've had the vaccine.
Although you probably, if you are vaccinated against COVID, you might not need to pay the additional 10% to get COVID coverage, right? Because if you've been vaccinated against the vaccine, you're not going to get COVID, and therefore you wouldn't have to pay for COVID coverage. You wouldn't need it anymore. So yeah, technically you're not getting a discount, but you wouldn't have to pay that extra 10% fee. So that's what we're thinking anyways, is going to be the result of the vaccines. They're so new, again, like just the first people in Canada are being vaccinated just this week. So it'll be interesting to see if insurance companies do something special for vaccinated people or not.
Okay, Joyce has a very good question. Are these policies for private hospitals? Example, in Puerto Vallarta, they have both regional and private hospitals. And what if I want to go to a specific hospital? Joyce, the policies we have here don't mandate which facility that you need to attend. When you do call, they may suggest a facility that already has a billing arrangement with them to make your life a little bit easier. But there isn't a requirement in the policy to go to a specific location. She also says, are most of these policies you pay first and then submit a claim, or do they pay up front? As long as you call the insurance company prior to seeking medical attention, the insurance company will work directly with your medical facility whenever possible. There have been times where the medical facility itself states that they require payment up front, and that's a decision made not by the insurance company, but by the medical situation or medical facility. But all of our insurance companies will accept direct billing. Dan wants to know, how much is the Cadillac coverage for 2 weeks in March to Maui? Dan, you're going to have to give our office a call.
Get a quote. We'd be happy to.
Absolutely. And it's no obligation. We're not very pushy. We're kind of friendly. But we do need a few more bits of information that you might not want to discuss on a webinar. We need your age, your medical history, and that type of thing. And then we're happy to provide you with a quote. Diane says you mentioned 4 options for travel medical insurance, but only gave 3. And is there a 4th?
I was thinking, Pam, that you missed Allianz in your list.
Oh, I did. Did I miss Allianz?
Yeah, you did miss Allianz.
I am sorry.
Very good pickup there by Diane.
She's paying attention.
She's paying attention. Yeah.
Okay. And she wants a bit more information about the transporting the vehicles to the US, Lori.
Yeah, so just a bit of information on that. Like, we did do a bit of groundwork to see like what was happening in the West. Like, you'll notice if you go to like any of the news articles that have been written are all about, you know, people in the East and you know, they are shipping their cars and all that stuff. So we did do some legwork on car shipping in the West, and you know, so I do have some information. If you would like to get that, I'd be happy to send it to you. It's not really something I can give over the presentation easily. There's websites and phone numbers and different stuff. So after today's webinar, you're going to be getting an email from us, and that is going to like give you access to the recorded video and the presentation, and also a feedback form on feedback on the webinar. We'd love to have your feedback. And one of the things that you can ask for on that feedback page is information on the car shipping, or if you'd like a quote, you can tell us there and someone will contact you. And so we'd be happy to email you information, you know, if you will let us know that you want it.
Perfect. Kathy and Jim wanted to know, if you contract COVID while away and hospitalization is required that extends beyond the period of specified insurance coverage, does the insurance coverage end? Very good question. All of your policies will have a clause that touches on this. You know, the policies may vary slightly, but normally what happens is, whether it's COVID or any other medical condition that requires you to be hospitalized beyond the expiry date of your policy automatically extends until you are released from the hospital, and then we'll give you a few additional days to get home. Some cases it's 3 days, some cases it's 5, but the policy doesn't leave you high and dry. As long as you are hospitalized and that same medical situation is being dealt with, the policy will continue to cover you. Joyce wanted to know, do we still have to buy travel health as well as separate COVID coverage? Joyce, you can buy 2 types of policies. One will have emergency medical care for everything else and include COVID. Another policy will exclude COVID, or you can just buy a COVID only policy. So it depends what you already have in place and what you need while you're traveling. Again, giving us a call and letting us know, we can get those numbers for you and the types of policies that you need. Barry wanted to know if you could give a percentage in the difference of value between the Cadillac versus the basic coverage. Again, Barry, we can't, because it is very dependent on all of those little details. I will let you know that today I did a quote for somebody and the Cadillac coverage was $3 more than the Chevy coverage. So for $3, they got all the bells and whistles that they might need on a policy. So it's a really good idea to give us a call. Let us do that comparison, and then you can make the decision whether or not those extra perks are worth it. Wendy would like to know, do the insurance companies attempt to fly you home if you are stable, as the cost of a charter may be cheaper than staying at destination? Wendy, if you do need continued medical care and it is deemed medically necessary, they will definitely be flying you home in a situation like that. Again, they'll make sure to work with your attending physician so your health isn't compromised by that flight. But yes, they are going to want to get you home as soon as possible. Leona wants to know, will her public service healthcare plan be extended due to COVID? I'm not sure I understand the question, Leona. Normally, if you have an annual plan, it allows for a certain number of days. If you have an annual plan and it's got an expiry date and the insurance company has decided to do an extension, they will have notified you. If you do have a plan through our office, give us a quick call. We'll look up your file and look at it specifically for you. Wendy would like to know, once you are discharged from a hospital, is there coverage for return airfare, or would that fall under trip interruption? No and yes. No, the airfare itself would not be covered by your emergency medical policy. Trip interruption would cover that type of cost. Again, currently only if it's not anything to do with COVID, because that's a known risk. Sally says, do you need travel and COVID insurance when traveling within Canada? When you travel within Canada, most medical costs are covered in another province to the same value had that medical situation happened at home. There are 3 costs that are never covered by your home province, and that is land ambulance, air ambulance, and repatriation if someone passes away in another province. And those last 2 are the real pricey ones. Now, for example, if you live in Manitoba and you travel to BC and you break your leg skiing, if that medical care for that broken leg in BC is $10,000, but in Manitoba it only would have been $6,000, you are responsible for the difference. We do offer policies that cover Canada only. So of course they're going to be on a different pricing scale than those that offer coverage in another country. So if you are traveling within Canada, the recommendation is to give us a call. let us know and we'll do a quote for you. Wanda would like to know, will Canada allow someone to pass immigration if they have COVID and went away against government's recommendations?
I don't know that there's a travel insurance angle in that question.
Not really. The only thing I can say is that I do know that if you fly and you're planning to fly home and you are not well, airlines are not allowing you to board a flight to come home. I don't know what happens if you're driving across the border and they realize you're not well at the border. That's, again, beyond our expertise. And that was the last question so far, Lori.
Okay, so the last question. So it is about 5 minutes to the 1 hour time frame. So unless anyone else has any other questions, then we will thank you very much for joining us again. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and we will hopefully get some feedback from you guys. And if you need a quote or if you need some information on the car shipping, feel free to let us know and we'd be happy to send that to you. Okay, so thanks very much again and appreciate your time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.